back for day 2 of QuarantineCon.com, and I hope everybody's enjoying this virtual Comic Con. Have you checked it out at all, Jarek?
I have, actually. It's some really cool stuff, and browsing with the different artists, what they have going on. There's a lot of really cool things you can do, a lot of traffic going on there as well, and interactions. So if you're not doing it now, you definitely might want to do it here in the future, because there's a lot of really awesome stuff going on with Quarantine Con.
That's right, man. So it's totally free. You get your free ticket, and it'll enter you into the con. It's set up like a con. Everybody's got their booths and things like that. If you guys didn't know, Jarek and I co-host a TV show called The Adventure Begins. It drops every Thursday on certain social media platforms, as well on Roku for me and for you.
Yeah, we do cool stuff such as we talk about upcoming comics. We open up new games. We have funny jokes and skits, or at least we think they're funny. Once again, that drops every Thursday on certain social media platforms and on Roku for me and for you.
Yeah, that's right. And after this interview, you can see Counterspace, which is one of our skits. Today is our first interview, man. I'm super excited. Being a comic book nerd, totally excited, man. He's an illustrator, a writer, a creator of multiple different superhero and sci-fi comics. He's a staple of DC, the man who takes his time drawing the fastest man alive. Give it up for Scott Kolins.
Hey, everybody.
Dude, thanks so much for hanging out with us. And I've been waiting like a week to do the man who takes his time drawing the fastest man alive.
That's a good one.
You can totally have that if you want. Or I'm going to put it on the t-shirt.
There we go.
So to all the viewers, just like yesterday, if you have a comment or a question, I'll be looking at all the platforms and watching out for your questions. And then we may ask it on air and all that jazz. Mm-hmm. So let's do... today has got a theme to it, and I didn't mean it to be organized this way. It's a horror theme, and I heard that you're a big horror fan, which I'm even more excited that you're on today's show. Tell us a little bit about what kind of horror things you nerd out about.
My horror niche of it that I really enjoy ever since I was a kid is the monster genre. That's the part that I was always interested in as a kid. I'd stay up till the wee hours of the morning to catch a Godzilla show back then, or King Kong, or Creature from the Black Lagoon, all that really great old creepy stuff. That was the stuff that intrigued me the most. And oddly enough, that was my entry into being a comic book reader as well. The Hulk was my first comic book. And it was because he was fighting Wendigo in that book that it totally captured me. It was just monsters all around. So, yeah, I loved all that stuff.
Nice.
That was your first comic book to read or to draw? Oh,
just to read. Yeah. When I was a kid and I passed through a store before there were comic stores, on the magazine rack and everything else, I saw a couple issues of the Hulk, and I saw a big green monster, and I went, wait, what? And my friends and I were racing through the store. So they kept racing through, lost track of me, and I just sat there in front of that magazine rack just reading, and then buying them, taking them home, and reading it like 100 times more.
Right on. And if you had the option, or if somebody gave you, hey man, you can write or draw for any of these monsters, would it be for Godzilla?
Sure. I mean, I'd love to do Godzilla stuff. I haven't really considered that. I always consider that such a separate thing from what I'm normally doing. But yeah, I love Godzilla stuff. And in fact, for a short time, a buddy of mine that was in the studio with me, he was doing a fill-in set or a regular set, I can't remember now, of Godzilla books. And he needed help with an issue they were falling behind on stuff. So I actually got to draw an issue of Godzilla for Dark Horse Comics, which was a huge learning curve because I don't know if I love Godzilla, but I don't know that I've made any regular drawings of him when I was a kid. So drawing him for that issue was like a way big learning curve of trying to figure out his proportions and how to make it work and how to tell a story with a monster that's that huge.
Right.
That's really difficult to do.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially if you're not familiar with it. You've had a lot of great success. For you personally, what moment was it that you felt that you had to make comic book your profession?
As soon as I started reading those books when I was a kid, I was hugely infatuated with it, and I started drawing right away, drawing their characters and making up my own right from the beginning. Somehow I thought that was just a natural part of the process. but it was around, I don't know, ninth grade or somewhere in there where just around the age when people really start pestering you saying you should probably give up this silly little comic book thing. I had a paper route, and through one of the guys on my paper route found out that there was actually a comic book artist in my hometown who was working for DC Comics at the time. So I immediately just started bashing on his front door every day. Found out a bunch of other kids were doing the same thing. So the poor guy was having difficulty getting his work done because for all these kids finding out about him. But we made a little comic book club that would meet every Wednesday kind of a thing. His name was Dennis Jensen. He was actually quite a very skilled inker of that time. And he was inking The Flash when I met him. So it's one of those weird loop arounds because I never imagined getting on The Flash or doing any of that stuff. But he was inking Carmen and Fantino on some of those, the last couple of years of him working on The Flash before Flash 300 or Crisis Infinite Earths, all that stuff went on.
Wow.
But it was meeting him and finding out, oh my, you know, he's got a wife, he's got kids, he's got a house. This is a real thing. And I started telling that to all my parents, relatives, whoever else was telling me that I should give this stuff up. I'm going, no, it's a real job. I can do this.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, on your comic book clubs that you met up, did he ever attend any of them and give you guys some tips and tricks and things?
Oh yeah, that was part of the deal, was that he actually organized the club so that it would just be once a week that he would lose a few hours talking to his kids about all this stuff so he could get all his work done during the week. Otherwise, we were constantly bothering him all week long. You know, there's like 5-7 of us coming in all during the week long. So he was the one who organized, said, all right, everybody, come on, let's just meet Wednesday over. We met at a church, his regular church. They had meeting rooms and stuff like that. And then, he was giving us lessons and talk about stuff the whole time for years. It was a huge, big step into that being a real world versus just some sort of fantasy.
Right, and you get those horror stories when you meet your heroes and all that jazz. Then they kind of, you wish you never met the hero, but man, he sounds like a really cool cat.
He really does.
He was super helpful, at least for that time period, age period up until high school stuff. Then things started to wane, and I think he was becoming a little bit disillusioned with comics and working in the business and stuff. But then just after high school, trying my own regular college town, my next leap was going to the Kubert School in Jersey.
Oh, very cool.
Nice.
That's awesome.
So besides him, what other major influences do you have, especially growing up and getting wanting to get further into the industry?
Well, I mean, there's the main guys that I read when I was a kid, like the John Byrne, George Perez, and then you get farther into it, the Michael Goldens, the Barry Windsor Smith, all of those fantastic artists and artist-writers. But then the next big influences probably would have been some of the teachers that I had at the Kubert School, who were massively influential of me getting to that closer step of being professional to be hired. And then even helping organize initial meetings that I would have with editors and stuff so that I could get those first critiques from their point of view, straight from them in the business, meeting in the office, all that kind of stuff. So some of the teachers I had were Kim DeMulder, who was another fantastic inker throughout his career in comic books and stuff like that. He's still a teacher at the school. And I'm going to forget all the names. Hy Eisman was my lettering teacher. That was majorly influential because that made me realize the importance of the balloons placement, of the style of lettering, of paying attention to logos and titles and all that kind of stuff, which I do in most of the work that I can now. If it's any sort of regular work, especially during my Flash days, I would talk with the letterer, I don't know, every week, every couple of weeks, something like that. It was awesome. But the other big name influential guy, I never got to be taught by Joe when I was at the school, which was a little bit sad. But the other big guy that I got taught by, who helped me immensely, was Bart Sears.
That's so awesome. Cool.
And that was just during the time for Bart when he was actually becoming that superstar guy. When I met him, he had just started on Justice League Europe. But it was by the time of the end of Justice League Europe and the Turok and other things did after that, they made him the big phenomenal star for a while that he was and doing all that.
Yeah.
Totally.
Dude, what a great set of teachers.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been incredibly lucky.
Most definitely, man. A lot of people will be jealous, but that's really cool. It's been said that you need about 10,000 hours doing whatever to be an expert. How many hours do you think you've drawn in your life? Are you expert level yet?
Well, at this point, I may have actually, clocked in some 50,000, 100,000 hours. But I would say if the average rule is 10,000 to make themselves a good at a craft or whatever, I think I probably had to pull in about 20 or 30,000 hours to make myself what I would consider to be acceptable and good at it. Because I wasn't, as I broke in, the business was still booming at that point. So there were lots of extra jobs, even for beginner guys like me that probably weren't really ready. I mean, I did start in the 8-page stories and the backup stories and all that kind of stuff to kind of get my feet wet and do all that and learn my lumps and make my mistakes and that sort of thing. But it really wasn't like until 5 years in or so, at least that I was just like, oh, okay. I feel like at this point I could handle just about nearly anybody's script as long as it's a decent, competent script that we handed in. I could make sense out of it. Even if they made some mistakes or this or that, I could kind of coalesce that and still be able to turn out a certain level of productive or professional product.
Right.
Whereas those first couple of years, if I was handed some weird script over here, I probably couldn't really made heads or tails of it. It would have been a mess. But now, or at that point, the 5 years in, then I was like, okay, now I kind of know what I'm doing, and I could take this and that, and I could always figure out. I'd be comfortable with the product when it was done.
Right on.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that you're one of those cats who is always learning, always trying to hone your skill and craft. There's some people I've talked to who's like, yeah, I know enough and I'm fine. Which I guess if you're comfortable with, cool. But I figured as long as you keep learning, there's new styles and new.
Oh yeah, learning still today. There's no end to that.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Awesome. Speaking of learning, Jared.
Speaking of learning, so there's a lot of people who want to get into the industry. They really want to at least or hone the skills and get better. Would you have like 3 tips for anyone who is trying to learn how to draw or learn especially a new art style?
3 tips. Figure you really have to get past the initial, I think, hurdle of it's going to take longer probably than whatever you think it's going to. Mm-hmm. In fact, when I had been through the Kubert School for almost 2 years at that point, and Bart set me up on one of my first interviews at DC Comic Books, after he was nice enough, he set it up with the editor. He knew the guy, asked for a favor to do the interview with me and all that kind of stuff. But before Bart sent me out, he goes, just so you know, you're not ready. I'm like, thanks. Well, how many? But he was right.
There be somebody.
Right. Yeah. But it's one of those things where the reality of making comic books is actually super complex on the writing side of it, or any particular edge of it, writing, penciling, inking, coloring. The millions of decisions you make almost on every page. When you think about it, when you realize how many decisions you're making, and the more that you find out, the more you learn about the thing, you realize these millions of decisions you're making. It can overwhelm you. It can be a lot of stuff. That could be compounded by then making a brand new comic book on your own, which is your brand new character, your whole new thing. You're not drawing the Fantastic Four that's already been drawn for 50 years, and you know what it looks like. Or Superman that, oh yeah, well, Lex Luthor kind of looks like this. I could put my little twist on him, but we already have this history that's been showing you how to do all this stuff. But if you come up with your own Bob superhero or character this or alien that, and doing it on your own, then there's a billion new decisions to make on every page of how you're going to portray that thing. How is it going to be different than anything you've done before? How are you going to do this in a way that isn't just a revived version of something else, whatever. So realize, first off, it's going to be a lot of huge decisions. It's going to be a pretty big, steep hill that's going to be climbing. And you're going to wind up with all sorts of walls and realistic problems, emotional problems that are just going to want to stop you along the way. Becoming an artist is really one of those, to me, in a lot of ways, soul-searching scenarios with a job, because to me, as the idea of mastering anything, you're going to wind up with points when, like you said earlier, that you're going to go, well, I've reached this point. This is good enough. This is great. I'm happy with this, whatever it is. And then either the job is going to challenge you and go like, yeah, that's really cool, but look, we've got, Frank and Sue over here that could do the same thing, maybe even twice as fast as you or whatever else you're doing. Then you realize that you have to up your game again. You have to do this or you have to change that. anyway, the first one is realizing the challenge is probably longer than you think. And then the second big thing is find out as many rules and components of the job as possible. Find all these things that the professionals will be telling you about, where there's the 180-degree rule, or there's this storytelling rule, or villains come from this direction. Learn all the reasons why we read from left to right in America and how that's been incorporated into American comics and all that kind of stuff. Find out about all those rules that, yes, of course, you will break those rules. But the more you know about those rules before you break them, and it often sounds ridiculous or backward, telling that to students sometimes, but the more you know those rules and why and how to break them will make you a better artist and all of that kind of thing. And then number 3 would be, although always striving and pushing yourself and as many people around as you can in your team to make the better comic books, have care and have as much patience and be as friendly and nice about the process as possible. There are times when I know I've not tried to, but I've been a jerk about this part going on or that part going on, arguing with my inkers or colorists, or sometimes arguing with writers. It's okay to discuss the projects and discuss the decisions that are being made and all that, of course, and pushing for what you hope or what you feel at that time is the best that you can make or the best product that can be put forward. But included with that, take a breath, relax, realize that, you know, pretty much everyone you might be working with by a happenstance or by your choice of these people that you're working with, everybody's trying to make a good book. Everybody's working in it. We may just not all see it the same way at the same time as you go along. So don't freak out about every little thing that happens along the way.
Totally.
There are times when I've called up editors and I would be screaming on the phone because, say, a colorist job that came in for a first issue of a book, one of the books I worked on, where, as it turned out, the colorist thought he was getting to do an A-level job with an A-level pay on this certain whatever book. But when the budget came down with the book from the comic book publisher and everything, oh, no, it was tier B. Well, the colorist was super pissed off, found out, and he did this kind of job that he thought was okay for tier B, but he was really pissed off about the whole thing.
Yeah.
I was freaking out because I didn't even hear about the A-level thing, but I didn't think the job he did was B-level. And it was issue 1 of the series, and I was still an upcoming guy, and all this kind of pressure was going on, so I'm pissed off about the whole thing. But when it was all said and done, you know, and years I look back on it, it's like, it's not that bad of a job. Relax, it's fine. It may not be what you dreamed of as this job as it's going along, but it was okay. Was it the dream thing that you're hoping for at that moment? No, but relax. It'll all come. You just keep pushing that brick down the hill or up the hill or whatever, and you're going to get where you want to go. It doesn't help you to make enemies out of anybody.
Yeah, I've learned that. Especially in the music industry, I've learned there's certain ways that you want something done, and then you can make enemies really quick, and that sticks with you longer than being a nice guy. Yep. So you don't walk into a room and they're like, "Hey, there's that nice dude, Chaz." They're like, "I remember that one time," and they're like,
"Yeah."
I mean, how much that too,
totally true.
Yeah, I mean, how much that transfers over to like even just personal life stuff. I mean, like look at you and you know how you really got into it. I mean, if he had been you know, kind of a dick about it, I mean, would you have gotten intrigued and gotten into it? I mean, it's amazing how much just simply not being a jerk really gets you far at everything.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, that it goes actually for going to cons or going to conventions or meeting people you're working with or the fans and all that kind of stuff. You always just got to take a breath, or I even do it on the social media stuff where I've had guys on my Facebook page or this or that where they really start taking a post or some comment or whatever down some strange rabbit hole, and they're going way off the deep end on the topic. And I'd be popping in once in a while going, okay, relax. Nobody's telling you this. Just take it easy. Let's not assume anybody's trying to like do something horrible here. And then I have my friends that are popping in on my side going, oh my God, you're being so nice to that guy. He's being such a jerk. What do you just ban him? I'm like, let's just a couple more shots. We don't know what happened to him today. We don't know her today or whatever, or what's going on with me today. We don't know if, you know, you've got a family member that's sick. You don't know if something crazy went on with their job. You don't know if, you know, if they're dealing with medical issues or what could be going on. So, you know, again, it's like, if we all just take a breath and take it easy, it'll help you, I think. And again, if you're talking about this job or learning the business, it'll help you a long way if you remain civil, remain nice, remain positive.
That's right. Like Richard says in the comments, realizing everyone is a real person is key. And I think that's great for us to remember, especially with all these crazy times.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
So is there in a project you're working on, was there ever a character you thought you would dislike drawing at first, but then turned around and you actually just loved it?
Yes. There's been plenty of those times, because there's just some characters that I don't initially jibe with or whatever. Trying to think of just a drawing one. Actually, all right. Since we usually wind up talking about Flash stuff, I'll say that when Jeff and I started on Flash, one of his big agendas for the book was, besides doing what he needed to with Wally and pushing him as a character, he really wanted to deal with the rogues and make them more of a powerful force and make them work within this modern context of being a superhero and whatever that meant around that time. But when he was pushing all the original rogue characters at me, saying, here's this one, here's this one, here's this one, some of them, honestly, I was going, yeah, but can't we do a major changeover and fix, this and change that, all these different things. He came at the book much more as a super, super fan of the Flash book. I was a fan of Flash, and I liked the Flash, and I had several issues and enjoyed him at different times, and I enjoyed Wally when he's in Teen Titans and all sorts of stuff. But I wasn't as major guy of the Flash book itself like Jeff was. Jeff knew all the history. At this point now, it's taken him all these years, or he probably did it 10, 15 years ago now. He has every issue. Every issue of the Flash. His collection is complete. But when I knew him and starting this, he had most of them. He was only probably missing, 30, 50 issues. And I mean, I think this includes Golden Age and everything.
Man.
Yeah. But when we were going over the Rogue stuff, one of them, that the costume, I couldn't make any sense of it. And that's where you have to learn about backing off stuff and just letting it go and so on. I could not understand Mirror Master. I understood his power and understood, what he wanted to do, that kind of thing. But the green and orange costume, and he's got round things on his ears, plus this weird shaped helmet thingy that's going on. And then he's got this fabric collar on the middle. I'm like, what? How does any of that say a mirror? But I tried to talk him out of it. He said, no, he's got to stay original. I don't want to change him. He wanted to alter a little bit of Weather Wizard and some other ones, which we wound up doing. But he said, no, stick with it. And honestly, after, I don't know, the first 6 times I drew him or something like that, I was like, all right, cool. I'm getting the vibe of whatever the visualization works. I still don't know how it works as a character, why a mirror guy would be wearing these colors or this kind of thing. But again, the longer I've been on these things and studying Infantino or different stuff like that, one of the things I actually appreciate about some of these oddball characters that we have in comics now, and what I really like about comic books in particular versus comic book characters in other media, is that some of this stuff doesn't have to make direct sense. That's almost part of the childlike magic of it, of why would a guy who could fly or leap tall buildings put an S on his chest? Makes no sense at all. Yeah. But yet it works. It's cool. Especially when you get that kid factor in, where I like to bounce my stuff off kids once in a while and be like, do you like this or like that? And if they respond really well to you, like, okay, there's something that's going on there. There's an extra X factor or something going on with where these separate parts may not seem like they work, but they do.
Yeah. That brings I've got a friend of mine who likes, the Marvel, the DC movies and whatnot because they're more real.
Yeah.
They're set in pretty much in modern times. And we'll discuss the movie afterwards. And he's like, well, I didn't like it because of this. And I'm like, it's a comic book, dude. It's fantasy. Since you brought up some of the villains, we've got a question from Mr. Mark Blair. He wants you to be honest. Who has the better rogues gallery, Batman or the Flash?
Ooh.
To try and be as impartial, I think, as possible,
right.
I would say that Batman has the better rogues gallery. But to me, the better marker line in all of that is just whether you have a rogues gallery that's talked about or made an impression about in the book at all. Because I think that's the thing that changes between any of the top A-level characters that are out there in their books, and what immediately knocks other characters down to B level or C level or stuff like that. And it's a problem that I wish that I've been able to tackle in other books more that I have not had the chances of yet. Like, what I mean is Superman, Batman, Flash, to me, are easy picks for DC that all have great level villains, the Rogue Jolly, the whole bit. There's not a shortage of at least a handful, if not a dozen or more, really good villains that you want to use from that book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or Spider-Man, or X-Men, or Avengers, or FF, or right. All those books are like top tier, and you know it because if you ask anybody who's read those books or looked at them at all, or isn't even half aware of this stuff in movies or anything else, they could rattle off at least 6 villains that they know from that book or something like that, and that's where you know that it's key, that it's working. Whereas other characters I dearly love, like Hawkman, you show anybody any Hawkman books or whatever, who's going to be able to name more than 2, 3 Hawkman villains? For the most part. I mean, as any tried true villains that have lasted, especially over the decades or time now, which is to me one of the really important tests to show that they're a decent villain. And that's what to me shows the difference. Where Batman's probably got the better list of villains. Batman and Spider-Man probably have the best list of villains out of any comic books all over the place, and that's another reason why I think they're both those top tier heroes that they are. They've got the best villains. There's to me no doubt about it.
Right on. I want to give a shout out real quick. Michael Raddick. He's watching all the way from the Isle of Wight.
Ooh.
So
cool.
So thanks for tuning in. Let's see. Let's see. You've had a lot of success with the Flash, obviously. What is the hardest thing about drawing the Flash?
Hardest thing about drawing the Flash. Well, when I started on the book, one of the not difficult but nagging things that was annoying me was that it took me about 5 issues or somewhere in there where not only working with Jeff Scripps and stuff like that, but for myself, where I felt like I could draw Wally himself, his face, his character, his demeanor, that kind of stuff, that I knew who he was as far as my drawing goes. And I could handle him through any situation that was going out there, whether you'd have him just walking the streets by himself doing something, or if he's doing something with his girlfriend, wife, or even if he was doing a family man stuff, or, in a police situation, other situations. I knew who Wally was by that point, but it took me about 5 months to get a good solid grasp on his facial features and what my Wally was going to look like. Right. Then the next biggest tricks for him are pretty much what everybody else, I think, always faces, is the idea of, how do you draw a guy running with interesting poses all the time and not the same running pose all the time, that kind of thing. At least for a lot of other superheroes, there would be different poses that are part of the persona of that character and differentiate him from other people. You also have to find your own modern spin on doing that thing. So that was part of the, when I talked to DC at the beginning, when they offered me the gig and I accepted the monthly gig, I asked them back, I'm like, okay, what are you expecting from me from all of this? What is your requirement for me doing this job? What do you need? And Mike Carlin, who was kind of like the editor-in-chief at that time, just said, we just want to see a Scott Kolins Flash that no one else has seen before.
Very cool.
And that was actually the changeover of my style at that time. That's why I came up with that linear style, or used it the first time on books at that time. I had it in my sketchbooks while I was doing some previous runs on Legion of Superheroes and other stuff. But I just tried it on the Flash, saying, let's roll the dice and see how it goes. And let's see if DC even likes it, because I didn't know. I didn't tell them I was going to do it. They just said, give me something different, something cool. And I went, okay, here, how's this? And thankfully, everyone in the office was really cool about it. Jeff loved it. The whole team really grasped on. And thankfully, it did. The colors team they had and everything. If I would have had a weird colors team that didn't jive with it at all, we would have failed and crashed miserably. Because there's so much of the pressure of what goes on visually on that page, I was pushing into the colorist's hands.
Oh, so how much pressure is there when it comes to, putting your own spin on a classic character? I mean, you have especially the ones who've been around for, forever.
I think nowadays there's a lot. There was that turning point around the time when I came into the industry where the previous rule of thumb had always been that you carry on with the kind of the model sheets that almost were given before you. If you were drawing the Hulk or whatever, you kind of continue on with either a Kirby vein or a Salvasema vein or John Byrne or somebody that had already drawn and been successful in the book, you kind of continue with all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But around the time that I popped in, it was becoming much more prevalent that whoever was popping in on Batman was doing their take on Batman. And then it was to see whether or not the fans responded to it. If they did, great. Then that person might be on there for 3 years or some amount of time. And I think that was the same with both cases. Even when I went on to Avengers, I think there was a bunch of that expectation of, again, bringing this style that I'd started on The Flash, which kind of made everything look a little bit different than it had before, and was for me to bring that to Avengers. That's why one of the reasons why I think Avengers, the Earth's Mightiest Heroes miniseries that I did, one of the reasons why I feel like it worked, my own personal reasoning, is that even though we were doing year one time frame, so it was the beginning of the Avengers and how they formed and all those kind of old things, including drawing a bunch of their really old Silver Age costumes, which are bizarre in some contexts of looking at nowadays. But drawing them the way that I drew them, I thought brought those possibly antiquated costumes into a modern light or seen from a different angle. So then when the book was printed, even though we were doing stories based on those old stories, it didn't look like a reprint book.
Right.
Yeah.
It still had some sort of twist on it. So yeah, I think that's major in there now, although I wish there was actually a little bit more middle stream of stuff going on once in a while, so that you keep the properties still within the ballpark of looking like the properties. I think experimentation is great, but I think there should be some amount of the companies pushing a kind of a mainline agenda, saying like, okay, we should know what Dr. Doom looks like. If, this month and next month and crazy stuff goes on, and now you're doing a story where, Dr. Doom is, I don't know, got a red cape and he's Red Dr. Doom, or, doing these crazy things. That's fun for a while. But I really think you need to keep in mind of the long frame of what fans have really learned to expect from these characters overall. And you can play with things, but I think there needs to be that like recognizability of going like, Dr. Doom shouldn't look like Dr. Octopus. He shouldn't look like Galactus, or you know what I mean? And I think there's almost that level of reinvention these days where they're becoming a little bit unrecognizable.
Brandy Steele asks, which it's great because you were just talking about it. When working on a big character like the Flash, does DC give you a sheet saying these have to be incorporated into what you're doing with it?
When I started on Flash with Jeff back in the early 2000s, no. I mean, I think there was a little bit at that time that was just assumed, but there was nothing said to me about doing the Flash a certain way or not doing the Flash a certain way. Nowadays, when they did revamps like New 52 and stuff like that, then there's a certain amount of, they're passing out basically a little bit of the idea of how you're supposed to handle these characters now. If there was a major change in the costume, like Superman's costume, suddenly had a collar, or around his wrists it was different, or the belt thing and all that stuff. So there would be discussions on a lot of that. But again, most of the time it was not handed down as, here are the 7 rules you need to follow on this certain costume, or the modern Flash with the lightning and stuff that he has all over his costume now. A lot of that was a fair of give and take of doing stuff where I might draw, too few on this page or something like that. And they go, oh, wait, but we think it really works better under certain circumstances that you do this. Like, as we were working on it, I thought that those lines in Flash's costume were pretty much there all the time. And then they'd light up more maybe when he was running or something like that. They actually were okay with the idea that when he's not running and doing his stuff, as this time went along, they didn't have to always be there. But more so, again, it was more of an action-oriented special effect kind of a deal.
Right on. But when they gave him to you, was it like he has this is his name? You can't you can't rename him. His suit has to be red.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Right on. Well, you've also had like a solid run with Blue Beetle, who's a very underrated character. Why do you think the Blue Beetle is so underrated?
I really don't know. I think that's one of those things where, again, we have maybe a disconnect between generations of stuff, because I learned about Blue Beetle, actually, Jaime, the new character, from one of my sons, because he had been in some of the cartoons. Yeah. And he saw him on those cartoons in Batman or something else early on. and was telling me how cool he was. And when we go to the store, he'd want to get the Blue Beetle comic books or the trade paperbacks, what they come up with that time. And he always read some of it, but then there was a disconnect where the comic book was never quite similar enough to the animated version that he felt like he wasn't getting what he wanted out of it.
Right.
So I actually tried a bunch when I was working on it to try and get that feel, so that there were certain things I pushed to try and make it not look animated itself, but incorporate some of maybe the visual ideas, the eye shapes or stuff like that, so that he had that going on. But I think it's just that generational gap where it can be difficult sometimes, where we have, in general, I think, still older readers in comic books, though it is, I think, spread out again fairly well. But if we just had more kids reading comic books, I think a character like Jaime would do a lot better.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other DC characters you think deserve a bigger spotlight, such as like Blue Beetle?
Oh, I don't know. I think I love all the B and C level characters that are running through all that stuff. When I was on Blue Beetle, it was a complete thrill to me that it was not a mandate, but it was a suggested incorporation of how that book was supposed to be run and who the supporting characters and everything were, to not only have Ted Kord back, which was awesome part of the buildup, but they told us that they wanted Dr. Fate to be a regular reoccurring part of the plot and story and everything going on. And I was like, hallelujah, great, man. I'd draw Dr. Fate every issue if you want me to. I mean, I love Jaime and everything, but if you give me a Dr. Fate book, I'm off and running. So I think all of those characters in one shape or form or another deserve the spotlight like that. It's just right timing, right place. You never know when they're going to hit. I mean, Punisher was a B-level disappearing background character for a decade or more or whatever before he started to hit his stride and really deserved his own book. So then he's off and on now, have had reoccurring books, movies, TV shows, all that kind of stuff. You never know when it's going to click.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, look at it too. I mean, Guardians, before the movie came out, how many people actually knew about Guardians of the Galaxy? And then all of a sudden it's a huge name in the industry. Yeah. And I think it's crazy how much that works.
Yeah, and then sometimes those concepts have to change stuff too, because this Guardians is actually different from the one from my childhood.
Yeah.
Which they showed a little bit in the movies. They brought in some of those other characters, Starhawk and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, you never know what. But yet, even though that original group didn't make it as far as the modern Guardians of the Galaxy, it's a whole new cast, but still Yondu was in there, and Yondu came off as one of the coolest ones, and he was always one of my favorites of the original cast.
And he was memed like nobody's business with the Mary Poppins.
Oh, yeah.
Again, it's just, you never know when that stuff was going to strike, and it all just coalesced, and he became almost like an A-level character for the whole movie thing. I mean, half of that second movie is about him.
Yeah.
And it's awesome.
So you talked about a lot of history when it comes to comics, especially like I said, these big name A-list heroes, and also their rogues gallery. How important is it as a creator to understand your history for these long-lasting characters?
I don't know that there's always time to, but whenever I get onto a book and do stuff, I try and check out as much as possible, more than I ever did before. When I started on Blue Beetle, I tried to check out a bunch of stuff, all the Ted Kord stuff, the Steve Ditko stuff from way back when he was created, as much as I could through gathering a bunch of other trades from the series before me and stuff like that, just to get a feel for what I thought worked best or didn't work best, similar to that idea of finding out about as many artistic rules have been put in place about how to make comic books, that teachers and stuff will tell you why this works, that doesn't work. It's a similar thing. Doing as much research allows you to find out as much, so that if you're going to break some rules or change some things about it, you're hopefully changing the right things. Like in the case of Flash, I think it was a beautiful mix between Jeff and I, that he was such a super, super fan of the book and knew everything like it was his Bible. Whereas I came a little bit from a new flavor. So I was questioning more of the times what was going on, but he'd be able to tell me why of this and that and the other thing. And I could also once in a while point out going, yeah, but what if we did this instead or turn that? And then he'd be either able to incorporate that or be able to do this reason of like, right, but we need to do it for this reason because this is why the Flash works. Stuff like that.
Totally.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Seeing all right. He had it back to back, but seeing as though that you wrote an entire series with them, you seem to have a lot of fun with Solomon Grundy. What makes that such a fun character to work with?
Well, starting off with, that's back to our beginning of this interview, is that he's a monster. So for years, when I wound up spending more time at DC than at Marvel Comics, obviously when I was at Marvel, I was telling the editors all the time, if I could ever get my hands on the Hulk, that'd be a great thing. And I've had little bits where I got to do the Hulk, but during all this time at DC, I just kept bothering him for years, off and on. Jeff and I were both bothering them about Solomon Grundy, and it was at a San Diego con right before that Faces of Evil, which I didn't know was coming. That we were sitting at the table, a whole bunch of DC people, and Jeff was next to me, and we were chatting about stuff. Sorry. And
No.
Jeff turned to me and he said, "You should really do some Solomon Grundy these days and do some." I'm like, "Well, of course. When is that going to happen? How? You show me the way, man. Come on, you know." And he literally just yelled at Dan across the table. We had this big round table. He goes, "Dan, what about a new Solomon Grundy book?" Dan's like, "Sure. Who's going to write it?" And Jeff pointed at me. And I'm like, "Ah!" And Jeff knew that I've been wanting to write stuff for a long time, write and draw the books and everything else. So he was super helpful and influential. He helped me organize that Faces of Evil one shot beforehand, and then the regular series. But the real interest in it, and Jeff has this interest too. It's one of the things we bonded on with some of the Gorilla Grodd and different stuff for the Flash books. But love monsters. So the more monstery we got to do with the whole series of that 7 issues, which again, I didn't know it was going to be 7 issues either. I thought I'd get maybe 4 issues out of it or something like that. Yeah. But they said, no, do every day of the week as an issue. Oh, okay. But the fact that he was a monster and that he was fighting other villains, and a lot of those cases I tried to make it other monsters. I'm in, Saturday Night Heaven. I'm just like at the movies going, okay, where are we going to fight a battle now? How many buildings do I get to break?
Well, I'm just Googling your name, obviously the Flash comes up like all over the place. So I had to ask a Solomon question just to let people know that you're not just Flash, you're a whole bunch of people.
Thank you, yeah.
Yeah, not a problem. You've also worked on the Brave and the Bold comic. Yes. Who do you think makes the best team up on the DC universe?
I guess the best team up would be, to me, generalized in the idea that you take a super popular character and then you take an obscure character that maybe no one knows. When I was a kid and I read Brave and the Bold, and it was always Batman and somebody, that was half the interest, was how's Batman going to deal with this other guy that he's going to run into, or Huntress, or whoever it was at the time. But it would also give you this great entry into the whole world of DC comic books, where all of a sudden he could be with Dr. Fate this issue, and Wildcat the next issue, or whatever obscure characters going on, or even OMAC or something crazy going on. That's when I think it works the best, as that kind of that can give you a vibe that I think a lot of other books can't or don't do. Right. Batman would be busy with his own stories and his own rogues gallery, or what's adding to Gotham City and all that other kind of stuff. And a team up book, either for Marvel or for DC, I think that's the best way that it works out, was that you don't want to throw, if it's the Marvel team up book, sure, if you want to, make sure number 1 and number 2 sells, you put Spider-Man and Wolverine on the cover and you run with that sort of thing. Right. But if you really want to play to the strengths of that book, actually I say there's 2 things to me, the strength of that book. One is to have a very popular character and then an obscure character, so you get to find out more and change it up. And then the number 2 thing, which I only got to do a little bit in all of those Brave and Bold or Marvel team up, is you got to have those heroes, or whoever they are, fight. You got to have some sort of skirmish go on, so that you see how the 2 of them bounce off each other and whatnot like that. That was one of my big things when we worked on Marvel team up. I didn't have that time frame for Brave and Bold, but on team up, that was my thing to Kirkman all the time. I was like, come on, man, we got to have them fight. Those 2 main characters, whoever's going on, they got to have 3 pages of the misunderstanding, so they don't know who's on what side or what's going on, or the villain's involved somehow, whatever. I don't care what it is, but you got to have the 2 of them, or however many, 3 of them, go toe to toe for a while and let it play out for a little while and have some fun.
Right on. My favorites were always Batman and Plastic Man. I don't know why. That's so cool.
That's awesome. Absolutely.
Man, we just got a couple more questions for you, and there you go, dude.
Yeah. So you kind of hinted at this before with Monsters or Dr. Fate. If you had one dream project, what would it be, and who would you most likely want to team up with?
You mean another creator teamed up with?
Yeah, another creator.
That would most likely be Jeff Johns. He is a writer that I've just clicked with like no others. I had a great time with a bunch of other people, Keith Giffen on Beetle and different things. But Jeff and I, like right from the get-go, there were times when I did fill in issues on his very first book, Stars and Stripe.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we met. And San Diego Con, early on, when we were both pretty much nobodies, we met up and talked about the issue that I was just handing in or something like that. And it was immediate for the both of us that we were like finishing each other's sentences. And really, even though coming from things at a different angle once in a while, really vibing on stuff and being able to like mix without even working hard at it. There was stuff that he mentioned in the first scripts where I forget exactly how this went, but there was Courtney's father was at a bus stop, and he was supposed to pull out a picture of Courtney, and he's supposed to be this mysterious character who was going to take a few issues as a subplot to eventually then meet her in the book or something like that, run in, cause problems, what he was going to do. And I think there was a locket thing that was already in the story on Courtney's side, something like that. But when I finished the page with the father character and he's at the bus stop and he's supposed to look at this picture of Courtney, I put Courtney's face inside a locket that he wore around as a necklace thing around his neck. And then I had him get on the bus or whatever it was. And when I saw Jeff at the San Diego Con, he's like, "Oh my God, you did the thing. You did the..." I'm like, "No, it was in the script, man. I just did what you told me." He goes, "No, the locket. I didn't write that in there." So it was like we were mixing so well. So the dream project is to work with Jeff on a book. And then actually at this point, because we've worked on so many different things together and so many things across different companies and stuff, the real dream project at this point is to do more creator-owned stuff. I mean, I'll always love working on Flash or all these different things again. That's never going to go away. And I'll be happy to do that whenever and forever. But I've had a couple projects now that I was lucky enough to get off the ground at Dark Horse. Pastaways and my Atom Point 3 that I wrote and drew myself. Pastaways was with the writer Matt Kint. But there's nothing like doing your own book. There's that fun and that freedom, that responsibility, that level of manic pulling your hair out once in a while. Again, reaching those like emotional walls where you're like, you know, you're fighting with something, it doesn't feel like it's working, but you have to keep fighting at it until you do it and you break through. You feel like you've actually accomplished something, getting somewhere new. That's a feeling like none other for me of working in this business.
Nice. Now, I've heard rumors. Do you and Jeff have something coming out in the near future? I mean, you don't have to tell us what it is. Just give us a maybe, yes or no.
The answer is yes, hopefully. We have a project. We have a proposal in for a book at DC. If that proposal goes through, which I don't know, should, but you never know. That would make a lot of our fans from previous books we've worked on very happy, including us. Something that we've been talking about a long time. And then beyond that, Jeff and I actually too, since we hooked up again on Shazam stuff, we've really enjoyed working together. So beyond this DC project book, he and I are both talking about a creator-owned book as well to do elsewheres. So yeah, the answer is yes. And I don't know. We'll hopefully find out in the next 3-6 months at the most. Cool. I'm hoping it soon, and then I want to get going on it because it'll again be one of those things where, like some other things we've done, like Shazam, and we worked on that story for Captain Cold story for Flash 750. Yeah. A lot of those things were just like a hot knife through butter. They just ran so easy. There was no fighting in any of it. There was just enjoyment and a smooth sailing project. And within all of that, it didn't feel like we were being retroactive in any of this kind of stuff. Like when we did Rogue's Revenge. That was a big testing ground for both he and I, that we wanted to make sure that if we did anything that was Flash related or in that world, that we didn't feel like we were stepping in the exact same footsteps that we had done before. We didn't want to repeat ourselves, although not necessarily, changing the boat as we went along. They still had to be Captain Cold if it was the Rogues and all those characters. but somehow add to that and keep pushing it forward in that same context. So yeah, that's hopefully what's coming up, is a little bit of going for something that's very familiar for both of us, and hopefully make a lot of people happy.
Yeah. Nice.
Man, well, as soon as it comes out, dude, we'll have to get you back on the show and talk about it.
Absolutely.
I'm sure we'll be carrying it at the shop at the adventure begins. I guess, Scott, man, let the people know where they can find you, find your stuff. If you have anywhere, you got a web store or anything like that?
No, I'm terribly stupid about all that web store stuff and having my own website. I'm just social media. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. It's just my name. There might be a couple versions of it, but you'll see this ugly mug, and then you figure out that's me. And then I'm super reachable. That's how I work a lot of commissions and do different stuff these days. And I keep in touch with fans and all stuff. And I let them know what's coming out next and all that sort of thing.
Nice.
Very cool. Well, our last question of the day. It's a question that we're asking everybody that we're interviewing because we may indulge ourselves in said question. And I know that sounds weird, but it'll make more
sense.
Just a second. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a very serious question. So you walk into a deli, right, and you look up on the menu, and sure enough, there's your name on the board. What would your sandwich be? Like, what would be all in there?
My first reaction would be I'd probably walk out of the store.
Yeah.
What would my sandwich be?
Yeah.
Because so we're asking this question because we plan on making said sandwiches on future episodes of The Adventure Begins to eat them, to try them out. As long as they're not like, I'll do drumstick shavings with seriously sandwich with like anchovies and chocolate sauce. But if it sounds fairly delicious, man, we'll totally give it a try.
Yeah. All right. You want an interesting, funny, weird thing? For a while, when I was breaking in, I was a prep cook.
Okay.
And when I was doing the behind scenes and prepping all the foods and whatnots for the line cooks that would then make the meals, somewhere along that way, and I haven't tried it since then, but at the time when I was a prep cook, this became my favorite little sandwich to make.
All right, we're ready. Jarek's supposed to be right.
I don't think the bread mattered. I think it might have been a rye or something like that, a little richer kind of bread. But I put roast beef on there.
Okay.
Slices of orange.
Okay.
And a little bit of Thousand Island.
Okay.
Okay.
And for some reason, that was a brilliant sandwich for a while. But again, I haven't had that in years now. I need to try it again.
That sounds like a Scott Kolins sandwich if I've ever heard of one.
It's probably weird enough. There you go.
Just rye bread, roast beef, and orange slices. That sounds awesome.
And a little bit of Thousand Island.
And a little bit of Thousand Island. There we go.
Yeah. Very cool, man. Well, we'd like to thank you, Scott Kolins, for hanging out with us today on Quarantine Con. We really appreciate it, man. I had a really good time with this interview. I'd like to thank Mark Blair from the Kingdom of Geekdom with his help on a lot of these questions. Yep. Our next interview will be at 3 p.m. with Monster Hunter and Ghoultown frontman Lyle Blackburn. Quarantine Con is in full swing, so click the link in the description box. Check it out for free. Don't forget to visit The Adventure Begins on Facebook, Instagram, and the website for all upcoming events and yesterday's interview and this interview right here, man. Scott, thanks again. Really appreciate it. And cheers to your continued success, my friend.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, guys. This was great. I had a great time.
Very cool, man. We'll see you guys at 3.
Do you guys have any D&D stuff? I hate busy days.
What's up, dude? How's it going?
Exhausted, man. Absolutely exhausted.
Exhausted? You're exhausted. I had 5 customers last night.
5 customers? 5 customers? You got it easy, dude. You'd never... I'll let see you work for a day.
Like, it's so crazy over here. I could do your job.
You could never handle my side of the store.
You wouldn't be able to handle the comic side. There's, like, a lot of alphabetizing and letters.
Yeah, dude, whatever. You'd never be able to handle the game side. I mean, there's so much you gotta do. Like, you gotta know where everything is. You gotta deal with customers, pretend like you're interested with the Magic players. And the worst of all, you gotta make coffee for people. You know how long that takes? Nice day, huh? You're gurgling. Oh, you want to check out? It's going to be 5 more minutes. What kind of dog is that? Spencer, Spencer, what kind of dog do you think this is? Yeah, Spencer, no, really, what kind of dog is this?
I told you it's a pigeon.
I told you, like, a couple more minutes, I'll be ready for you, alright?
Excuse me.
Yeah, it's real rocket science. If I could dress myself, I could totally take over the gaming side.
Excuse me, do you have Arkham Horrors or Mansions of Madness?
Yeah, Chaz, do we?
Or Flux?
I don't know what any of that is.
I can help you. They'll be right over here, alright?
Thank you.
Ooh, coffee. Yeah. Cool. Oh, this is gross and it's cold. Do you think she can do my job? Sweet Christmas. Oh.